My child, come closer. I know the way your breath steadies when the noise finally fades. I know how you look back over the years and wonder how your feet are still planted, how your heart still beats with hope after all that tried to bury it. You did not imagine the weight. You did not exaggerate the pain. What you survived was real, and yet here you are, standing in a place many never reach. I called you here to tell you that your survival was not luck, and your strength was never an accident. There were nights when you should have collapsed under the pressure, when sorrow pressed against your chest like a stone, and you whispered questions into the dark that no one answered. You kept going without applause, without reassurance, without certainty. You stood in storms that were not short, not gentle, not fair. Still, something in you refused to surrender. That something was not stubbornness alone. It was my hand holding you upright when you thought you were holding yourself. I watched the moments when you smiled in public and bled in private. I saw how you learned to function while your soul was tired, how you learned to speak calmly while your heart trembled. You thought you were merely enduring, merely surviving another day, but I was forging endurance into you, quietly, deliberately, with care. Every time you chose not to give up, heaven recorded it. Every tear you wiped away alone became a testimony written beyond time. There was a point when the weight nearly convinced you that something was wrong with you. You wondered why it seemed harder for you than for others, why you had to carry lessons that felt too heavy, too early. Hear me now. I did not give you more because I desired to wound you. I trusted you with depth because I knew the strength I had placed within you. The fire did not consume you because it was never sent to destroy, only to reveal what was already there. Even now, as you listen, part of you is still surprised that you made it this far. You look at your own reflection and see scars before you see courage. But I see what the enemy failed to break. I see a spirit that bent but did not shatter, a heart that learned discernment through pain, a soul that can now recognize truth because it once walked through confusion. Your standing is proof that I was present even when you could not feel me. There are those who watched you silently, some who doubted you, some who waited for your fall, and some who never understood how you kept rising. They mistook your quiet for weakness. They misread your patience as fragility. But what they did not see was the divine reinforcement beneath your feet. What they did not know was that I was steadying you every time the ground shifted. Pause here with me. If your spirit recognizes these words as true, let it be known. Gently, without striving, type the word "still" in the comments, as a witness between you and me that you are still standing, still breathing, still becoming. And if this message carries light for another weary soul, allow it to reach them in the same quiet way I reached you. My child, you did not survive by accident. There were forces that tried to wear you down slowly, not all at once, hoping you would not notice your own exhaustion. There were moments when giving up would have felt like rest. Yet something deeper kept whispering, just one more step, just one more day. That whisper was mine. I was teaching you how to endure without hardening, how to remain open without breaking. I know you carry questions even now. You wonder what all of this endurance was for, why the road demanded so much of you. The answer is unfolding, but first you must understand this truth. Strength like yours does not appear randomly. It is shaped, refined, and positioned. You were being prepared, not punished. You were being aligned, not delayed. Stand with that truth for a moment. Let it settle into the places where doubt once lived. You are not behind. You are not weak. You are not here by chance. You are standing because I held you, and because you agreed, even when you were tired, to keep moving forward. And this is only the beginning of what I am about to reveal to you. My child, now that you have come this far with me, let me speak of what you never said out loud. There was a weight you carried that few ever noticed. You learned early how to minimize your own pain so others could feel comfortable. You learned how to listen while your own voice waited patiently in the background. What pressed on you was not always loud or dramatic. Much of it was quiet, constant, and unseen, like a slow tide wearing against stone. You carried expectations that were never spoken but deeply felt. You sensed what others needed from you before they asked, and you tried to become it. You bore responsibility that was never officially placed in your hands, yet somehow always found its way there. You told yourself it was normal, that everyone felt this way, but deep inside you knew you were holding more than your share. Still, you did not put it down. You adjusted your grip and kept walking. There were days when the exhaustion was not physical but emotional, when even rest did not feel restorative. Your mind replayed conversations, choices, moments where you wondered if you had done enough, been enough. You carried regret that did not belong to you, and guilt that was never yours to begin with. You apologized for things that were not your fault. You blamed yourself for outcomes you could not control. That weight bent your posture long before it ever touched your body. I saw how you learned to be strong without being taught how to be supported. I saw how you became the one others leaned on while quietly wishing someone would notice your own need to rest. You did not want to be a burden. You feared that asking for help would cost you love or respect. So you became capable, dependable, resilient. You became the one who handled things. And in doing so, you hid how heavy it truly was. There were moments when you felt invisible, not because people could not see you, but because they did not see what you were carrying. You longed for someone to look at you and say, "I see how hard this is for you." Instead, you were told how strong you were, how well you handled things, how you always seemed fine. Those words felt like praise, yet they added weight, because they silently asked you to continue being unbreakable. Listen to me now. The strength you showed did not mean you were unaffected. The silence you kept did not mean the pain was small. I was present in every moment you swallowed your tears, in every night you lay awake feeling misunderstood, in every decision where you chose peace over being fully seen. I collected every unspoken cry. None of it was wasted. None of it was ignored. There was also love mixed into that weight. You cared deeply. You hoped sincerely. You believed in people even when they disappointed you. That tenderness made the burden heavier, because you felt things fully. You absorbed emotional currents others deflected. You stayed longer than you should have, tried harder than was required, waited longer than was wise. Not because you were weak, but because your heart was generous. Yet even generosity has limits, and I know how close you came to reaching yours. There were moments when you felt yourself thinning, like you were giving from reserves that were already low. You questioned whether anyone would notice if you stopped, if you rested, if you chose yourself. That question alone tells me how much you had been carrying. You were never meant to hold it all alone. My child, I do not reveal this to shame you or to reopen wounds. I reveal it so you can finally release what was never meant to define you. That unspoken weight shaped you, yes, but it does not own you. It taught you empathy, discernment, and depth, but it will not follow you into what comes next. I am not calling you forward with the same load on your back. Breathe with me here. Let your shoulders soften, even slightly. You are allowed to acknowledge how heavy it was. You are allowed to admit that it hurt. Strength does not require denial. Healing begins when truth is spoken, even quietly, even just between you and me. What you carried explains why you are tired in ways that rest alone never fixed. It explains why certain words still echo in you, why certain memories feel heavier than others. But it also explains why your compassion runs deep, why your intuition is sharp, why your presence brings calm to others without effort. You were shaped in pressure, but pressure will not be your permanent environment. I am lifting what you could not put down yourself. I am untangling what wrapped itself around your heart. You will not have to carry the same way again. What lies ahead requires your strength, yes, but not your exhaustion. You are stepping into a season where weight is exchanged for clarity, and endurance gives way to support. Stay with me. There is more you need to understand about what almost happened, and why your survival mattered more than you know. My child, there was a moment you rarely revisit directly, a moment your spirit remembers even when your mind tries to soften it. This was the point where the road narrowed so sharply that continuing felt impossible. You did not announce it. You did not dramatize it. But inside, something in you whispered that you were closer to the edge than you had ever been before. This was not weakness. This was the honest response of a soul that had been stretched beyond what it understood. You stood there quietly, still moving through routines, still answering messages, still showing up where you were expected. But inside, you were unraveling. Hope felt distant, like a language you once spoke fluently, but could no longer translate. You questioned your purpose without fully forming the words. You wondered if your absence would create relief rather than loss. These thoughts did not make you broken. They revealed how deeply you had been fighting without rest. There was a day when the weight became so familiar that you stopped recognizing it as something you could put down. You told yourself this was just life, that everyone felt this way, that tomorrow would somehow be lighter. But tomorrow kept asking for more than you had. You learned how to function on fragments, how to give when empty, how to promise yourself you would feel later. That was the danger, my child. Not the pain itself, but how quietly it convinced you to disappear within yourself. I was closer than you knew at that moment. When you stared at the ceiling and felt numb instead of sad, when tears would not come even though your chest felt full, I was there. When you considered choices that would have ended the story I am still writing, I did not turn away. I leaned closer. I spoke to you through interruptions, through delays, through sudden thoughts that did not feel like your own. I guarded you even when you did not realize you needed guarding. There were unseen interventions that day. Conversations that did not happen. Doors that did not open. Timing that felt frustrating but was precise. You thought you were simply tired or distracted or unlucky. You did not see how narrowly you passed through something that would have changed everything. The enemy hoped you would confuse exhaustion with truth, hoped you would believe the lie that rest could only come through escape. But escape was never the answer. Restoration was. You almost believed that the world would continue without noticing your absence. That thought was a distortion born from pain, not reality. Your presence carries weight in rooms you have already entered and rooms you have not yet seen. Your prayers have shifted outcomes you never knew were unstable. Your endurance has quietly anchored others who never said thank you. If you had fallen then, there would have been ripples you could not imagine. I need you to understand this clearly. The fact that you are here now is not because you were strong every moment. It is because you were protected in moments when strength failed. I did not require perfection from you. I required your breath, your staying, your willingness to remain even when you did not know why. That was enough for me to work with. That moment passed, not because the pain vanished, but because something held you when you could not hold yourself. You found yourself waking up the next day without understanding how you made it through the night. You kept going without answers, without relief, without clarity. That continuation was holy, even if it felt mechanical. Survival itself was an act of faith you did not know you were offering. Do not shame yourself for how close it came. Do not minimize the seriousness of that season. You are allowed to name it as danger. You are allowed to honor how real it was. But you are also allowed to see it as evidence of divine interruption. You were stopped for a reason. Your story did not end there because it was not meant to. Now that you stand on the other side of that moment, even if the ground still feels uncertain, I want you to see what I see. You crossed a threshold without realizing it. You learned that feelings do not get the final word. You learned that life can continue even when certainty does not. You learned that asking nothing of the future is still choosing to stay. These lessons were costly, but they were not pointless. I did not save you only so you could survive. I preserved you because there is meaning attached to your staying. There are connections ahead that require the version of you that endured this. There is understanding in you now that cannot be taught any other way. There is compassion in you that will become a refuge, including for someone whose fate is tied to yours more closely than you yet know. What almost happened matters because it explains why what comes next must happen. You were not spared to remain in survival mode. You were carried through so you could step into something aligned, something gentler, something true. The dark edge was not the end of your story. It was the point where unseen hands redirected your path. Stay with me. The truth about what was working against you, and why that moment was not random, is about to be revealed. My child, what you did not see in that season was how much resistance surrounded you. You thought the struggle was coming only from inside, from fatigue, from disappointment, from unanswered prayers. But there were forces at work beyond your awareness, pressures aligning quietly against your peace. Not everything you fought was yours. Some of what weighed on you was placed there intentionally, hoping you would confuse interference with identity. There were patterns repeating that made no sense, obstacles appearing just as you gained clarity, emotional setbacks arriving right when you tried to rest. You questioned your discernment. You wondered if you were doing something wrong, if you had somehow stepped out of alignment. But the truth is this: when a soul carries purpose, resistance often disguises itself as coincidence. The opposition you felt was subtle, strategic, and persistent. Someone close to you carried jealousy they never named. Someone you trusted projected their own insecurity onto you. Their words were not always cruel, but they were draining. Their presence did not feel dangerous, yet it left you doubting yourself afterward. They smiled while withholding support. They listened while secretly resenting your resilience. You sensed the imbalance, but tried to reason it away, telling yourself you were being sensitive. That dismissal cost you energy you did not have to lose. There were also spiritual weights you absorbed that were never yours to hold. You walked into environments heavy with unresolved pain, and because of your empathy, you carried it with you when you left. You did not know how to separate compassion from self-sacrifice. You thought loving meant absorbing. But love was never meant to cost you your center. This misunderstanding made you vulnerable, not because you were weak, but because you were open. I watched as confusion crept in slowly. Not all at once, but gradually, like fog that thickens without warning. You began questioning your intuition. You delayed decisions you once would have made with confidence. You second-guessed feelings that were accurate. This was not accidental. The enemy rarely attacks directly when patience can do more damage. They hoped you would grow tired of trusting yourself. There were lies whispered quietly into your exhaustion. That you were too much. That you were asking for too much. that your needs were inconvenient, that rest was laziness, that silence meant rejection. These thoughts did not originate in truth, yet they sounded familiar enough to be believed. You thought they were your own thoughts. They were not. They were planted during moments of vulnerability. Still, even surrounded by unseen interference, you did not lose your core. You bent, but something in you resisted full collapse. That is because I had marked you with discernment even before you knew how to name it. Your spirit sensed when something was off, even if your mind tried to explain it away. The quiet discomfort you felt around certain people, certain conversations, certain environments, was wisdom trying to surface. What was working against you did not succeed because it underestimated one thing: your connection to me. Even when you doubted yourself, even when you questioned your path, you never fully severed the thread. You still turned inward. You still asked why instead of quitting. You still hoped, even reluctantly. That kept the door open for intervention. I need you to understand this so you do not carry misplaced blame. The struggle was not proof that you were failing. It was evidence that something in you mattered. Resistance does not gather where there is nothing to guard. Opposition does not linger where there is no movement forward. You were targeted because you were progressing, even when it felt like stagnation. Now that this truth is being revealed, its power over you begins to dissolve. Awareness breaks cycles that confusion sustains. You are not meant to fight unseen battles without clarity anymore. You are learning to recognize what drains you, what distorts you, what subtly pulls you away from yourself. This knowledge is not meant to hearten you. It is meant to protect you. What worked against you will not follow you into the next season in the same way. I am changing your proximity. I am adjusting your access. I am sharpening your discernment without costing you your tenderness. You will still love deeply, but you will no longer bleed quietly. There is more to uncover, especially involving a heart connected to yours that was also unraveling under pressure. Your collapse was unfolding at the same time as your resistance, and the two stories are not separate. Stay with me. What comes next will explain why your endurance mattered to more than just you. My child, while you were fighting quietly to remain upright, another heart tied to yours was unraveling in ways you could not see. This was not coincidence. The timing was precise. As pressure increased around you, it also tightened around them. They did not know how to name what they were feeling, only that something inside them was slipping, something familiar losing its shape. Their collapse was not loud. It was internal, slow, and filled with fear they did not know how to express. They carried guilt that did not fully belong to them, and confusion they could not explain. They felt drawn to you and threatened by that same pull. Your strength reminded them of what they feared they lacked. Your steadiness exposed their instability. Instead of reaching for you, they retreated inward, hoping distance would quiet what they felt. But separation did not bring peace. It only amplified the ache they refused to acknowledge. There were moments when they wanted to speak, when words pressed against their chest, asking to be released. Yet fear stopped them. Fear of being seen. Fear of being known. Fear of losing control. They told themselves they needed to be stronger before coming to you, more certain, more healed. But that delay became its own form of suffering. Silence turned into self-judgment. Longing turned into shame. They watched you endure, and it stirred something painful in them. They saw how you kept going even when wounded, and instead of inspiring them, it reminded them of their own fragility. They did not want to burden you. They did not want to fail you. So they chose distance, not realizing how deeply that choice hurt both of you. Their withdrawal was not rejection. It was collapse disguised as composure. Inside them, there was a quiet breakdown. The nights filled with restlessness, thoughts looping without resolution, regret visiting uninvited, asking what might have been different if courage had spoken sooner. They replayed moments with you, searching for proof that the connection was real and not imagined. Every memory carried both comfort and pain. Comfort because it was true. Pain because they felt unworthy of it. They tried to distract themselves. They told themselves they needed time, space, clarity. But clarity did not come through avoidance. It came through discomfort. The more they resisted the truth of what they felt, the heavier their spirit became. They began to feel disconnected not only from you, but from themselves. Their collapse was not dramatic, but it was profound. Something essential inside them was breaking open. I was with them in that breaking. I did not abandon them because they were confused or afraid. I watched them wrestle with emotions they had never learned how to hold. I listened as they asked questions they were afraid to answer. They did not know how to ask me for help directly, but their unrest was a prayer all the same. Even their avoidance revealed how deeply they cared. They feared that coming to you in their brokenness would cost them the connection entirely. They believed they needed to arrive healed, whole, certain. They did not yet understand that love does not require completion, only honesty. Their collapse was rooted in misunderstanding, not malice. They were not running from you. They were running from their own vulnerability. At times, their fear made them inconsistent. One moment drawn toward you, the next pulling away. This inconsistency confused you and added to your own burden. You wondered if you had misread everything, if the connection had been one-sided, if you were holding on to something that did not exist. But hear me clearly. Their silence was not emptiness. It was conflict. Their distance was not indifference. It was fear. They felt exposed by how much you mattered to them. Your presence stirred hope they did not feel ready to carry. They questioned whether they could protect you, support you, stand beside you without collapsing further. Instead of admitting their fear, they hid behind restraint. Instead of reaching out, they waited, hoping time would solve what only truth could heal. Their emotional collapse did not mean the connection was weak. It meant it was real. Shallow bonds do not cause this kind of inner reckoning. At least something meaningful forces a soul to confront itself so deeply. They were being confronted with their own wounds, their own limitations, their own need to grow. That confrontation was painful, but it was necessary. You were not meant to carry the weight of their silence. You were not meant to interpret their fear as your failure. Their journey inward was something only they could walk, even though it affected you. I allowed the distance not to punish either of you, but to reveal what needed healing. Sometimes separation is not a sign of loss, but a pause for transformation. Even now, their heart has not let go of you. They think of you more than they admit. They feel you in moments of stillness, in choices they hesitate over, in quiet reminders that something unresolved remains. Their collapse is not the end of their story, nor is it the end of your connection. It is the place where truth begins to demand courage. I am working in them as I am working in you. Different paths, same purpose. Their breakdown is making room for honesty. Their fear is being exposed so it can no longer lead. What feels like distance now is part of a larger alignment neither of you could have forced. Do not rush to rescue them. Do not shrink yourself to ease their discomfort. What is unfolding requires patience, not sacrifice. Your steadiness is already doing more than you realize. Simply by remaining who you are becoming a mirror they can no longer avoid. Stay with me. The interference you felt was not only external. There were hidden hands stirring confusion, exploiting fear, and feeding distance. What comes next will bring exposure, and with it, a shift neither of you can ignore. My child, there were hidden hands involved, subtle influences that knew exactly where to press. These were not always enemies who announced themselves. Some smiled. Some listened. Some appeared supportive while quietly sowing doubt. Their power did not come from strength but from access. They were close enough to hear, close enough to influence, close enough to distort truth without being questioned. Jealousy does not always look like anger. Often it disguises itself as concern, as advice, as caution offered at just the wrong moment. Words were spoken into your life that sounded reasonable but left you unsettled afterward. Suggestions were made that nudged you away from trust, away from rest, away from clarity. You felt the shift in your spirit but struggled to name it. That discomfort was discernment trying to speak before confusion took root. There were individuals who felt threatened by your endurance, not because you harmed them, but because your perseverance reflected what they had abandoned in themselves. Your growth stirred their insecurity. Your resilience reminded them of promises they never kept to their own soul. Instead of confronting the pain, they redirected it toward you, subtly, strategically, hoping you would carry it for them. Some of the interference came through your soulmate's circle as well. Voices that reinforced their fear. Opinions that magnified their doubt. People who benefited from keeping them small, dependent, or distracted. These influences did not want the connection to deepen because depth would require change, and change would expose their own intentions. So they whispered caution, magnified risks, and painted vulnerability as danger. You were not imagining the tension. Energy was being pulled in opposite directions, creating confusion where clarity was trying to form. Moments that should have brought peace felt complicated. Conversations ended with more questions than answers. This was not because truth was absent, but because too many uninvited voices were speaking at once. I watched how you tried to remain gracious. You gave the benefit of the doubt. You assumed good intentions. You told yourself not to overthink. That kindness is part of who you are, and I honor it. But kindness without boundaries leaves doors open that were meant to be guarded. Not everyone who speaks softly carries pure motives. Not everyone who appears close is aligned with your future. The enemy understands this. They know you are empathetic, reflective, willing to self-examine. So instead of attacking directly, they encourage you to doubt yourself. They use comparison to weaken your confidence. They used half-truths to blur your clarity. They hoped you would internalize confusion and call it humility. But humility never erases truth. It coexists with it. There were moments when you felt suddenly tired after certain interactions. Moments when hope dimmed without explanation. Moments when clarity slipped away just as it began to form. These were not coincidences. These were signs of interference, of emotional and spiritual boundaries being crossed without your consent. Your body noticed even when your mind tried to reason it away. I allowed you to feel this not to overwhelm you, but to awaken you. Discernment sharpens through exposure. You are learning to recognize what drains you versus what nourishes you. You are learning that peace is not something you earn through endurance, but something you protect through wisdom. This knowledge is coming now because you are ready to hold it without becoming hard. The hidden hands did not anticipate one thing. They did not account for my timing. They assumed confusion would linger indefinitely. They assumed distance would weaken connection. They assumed silence would dissolve truth. They were wrong. What was meant to scatter is being drawn into focus. What was meant to divide is being revealed. Even now, conversations are being replayed in new light. Intentions are becoming clearer. The unease you felt is beginning to make sense. This is exposure, not chaos. This is clarity arriving after a season of distortion. You are starting to see who benefits when you doubt yourself, who gains when you remain silent, who is uncomfortable when you stand firm. Do not feel guilty for recognizing this now. Awareness is not betrayal. It is growth. You are not required to remain accessible to those who misuse proximity. You are not obligated to explain your boundaries to those who benefited from your lack of them. Protection is not punishment. Distance is sometimes mercy, for both sides. Your soulmate, too, is beginning to see. The fog around them is thinning. The voices that once felt convincing are losing credibility. They are noticing how certain advice led them further from peace, not closer. They are questioning why fear was always encouraged while honesty was discouraged. This awakening is uncomfortable, but it is necessary. I am intervening quietly, rearranging influence, shifting conversations, removing access. You do not need to confront everyone. You do not need to defend yourself. Truth has its own gravity. What is not aligned will eventually fall away when clarity strengthens. Your role is not to expose, but to remain anchored in what you know to be true. The season is teaching you that not all battles require engagement. Some require discernment. Some require withdrawal. Some require silence paired with inner strength. You are learning to choose peace without guilt, clarity without apology, and self-trust without arrogance. This balance is rare, and it is being formed in you intentionally. What was hidden cannot remain hidden much longer. Light is moving through places that once thrived on confusion. The interference that once felt overwhelming is losing its grip. You are stepping into a phase where truth feels steadier, where your intuition speaks more clearly, where your spirit no longer feels crowded. Stay close to me. The exposure underway will lead to a turning point, one that shifts not only your understanding, but your future. What comes next is not chaos. It is correction. And from that correction, something aligned will finally be able to stand. My child, now comes the part you could not have forced, the moment when heaven began to examine what earth had hidden. You felt it first as a subtle change, a sense that something unseen was moving in your favor. The confusion did not vanish overnight, but it stopped growing. The weight no longer multiplied. That was not chance. That was investigation. Nothing escaped my sight. Every word spoken in private, every intention masked as kindness, every omission disguised as protection was brought into the light. I did not rush this process. Truth requires patience when hearts are involved. I watched carefully, separating fear from fact, influence from intention, love from control. What was genuine was preserved. What was manipulative began to weaken. You may have noticed people revealing themselves without being confronted. Small contradictions surfaced. Stories changed. Energy shifted. Those who thrived in ambiguity grew uncomfortable as clarity approached. This was not exposure meant to humiliate. It was revelation meant to restore order. When truth arrives, it does not need accusation. It simply stands, and what is false cannot remain upright beside it. I was also examining you, gently, lovingly, not to judge but to strengthen. I showed you where you overextended, where you gave access too freely, where you doubted your own discernment. This was not condemnation. This was preparation. You cannot step into alignment while carrying confusion about your own worth. I was teaching you to trust what you feel without abandoning compassion. At the same time, I was working in your soulmate's awareness. Questions began surfacing in them that they could no longer silence. Advice that once felt comforting began to feel heavy. Certain voices lost their authority. They started replaying moments, noticing inconsistencies, recognizing how fear had been encouraged while courage was quietly discouraged. This realization did not come gently. It came with grief. They mourned choices they made while afraid. They mourned words they never said. They mourned the distance that was never truly desired. This was part of the investigation as well. Truth does not only expose others, it reveals us to ourselves. As self-revelation is often the most painful and the most transformative. You were protected during this time in ways you may not fully recognize yet. Situations that could have escalated were paused. Conversations that could have confused you further were delayed. I limited what reached you while clarity was forming. You were not being isolated. You were being shielded while discernment matured. This is how divine justice works. It does not arrive as punishment, but as correction. It realigns what drifted. It restores balance where imbalance was normalized. It removes influence without creating chaos. You may not see dramatic confrontations or loud apologies, but you will see patterns break. You will feel peace return. You will notice that what once drained you no longer has access. The investigation revealed that much of what you blamed yourself for was never yours to carry. It showed where responsibility had been misplaced and where guilt had been inherited rather than earned. This understanding is lifting a burden from your spirit even now. You are beginning to breathe differently. You are no longer bracing for impact that never comes. Your soulmate is also standing at a threshold. They cannot unsee what has been revealed. They are recognizing how fear shaped their decisions and how external influence distorted their perception. This awareness is uncomfortable, but it is honest. It is the beginning of integrity returning to their choices. Do not rush them through this. Revelation requires space to settle. What is being rebuilt must rest on truth, not urgency. Trust that I am guiding both of you, even if the paths look different for a moment. Investigation always precedes restoration. What was hidden has been named. What was confusing has been clarified. What was interfering has been weakened. You are no longer walking in the dark, even if the path ahead is still unfolding. Light has already entered the story. Stay with me. The shift you are about to feel will not come from effort, but from alignment. Something is about to change, and you will sense it before you see it. My child, this is where you began to feel something you could not explain. Nothing dramatic happened on the surface. No announcement was made. Yet inside you, something shifted. It was as if the air changed density, as if the constant pressure you had grown used to quietly loosened its grip. You could not point to a single reason, but you felt it. The heaviness no longer ruled every moment. The fear no longer dictated every thought. This shift did not arrive as excitement. It arrived as calm. A strange, unfamiliar calm that felt almost suspicious at first. You were used to bracing yourself, used to anticipating disappointment, used to preparing for the next emotional demand. When that vigilance softened, you wondered if you were missing something. But you were not missing danger. You were exiting survival. You may have noticed your body responding before your mind caught up. Your shoulders dropped without effort. Your breath deepened on its own. Sleep came more easily, or at least more honestly. Even when problems remained, they did not feel as consuming. This was alignment beginning to replace endurance. You were no longer holding everything together by force. There were moments when clarity surfaced unexpectedly. Thoughts that once spiraled now reached a quiet conclusion. Decisions that once felt impossible suddenly felt obvious. You did not overanalyze them. You simply knew. That knowing was not impulsive. It was discernment returning to its rightful place. When interference weakens, intuition regains its voice. You also began to notice a change in your reactions. Things that once triggered deep emotional waves now passed through you with less intensity. You still felt, but you were no longer flooded. You still cared, but you were no longer consumed. This was not detachment. It was regulation. Your nervous system was learning safety again. At the same time, memories resurfaced, but without the same sting. You could think of moments that once caused pain and observe them with distance. You saw patterns more clearly, without self-blame clouding the view. You understood why things unfolded the way they did, not to excuse harm, but to release yourself from carrying it forward. This understanding did not harden you. It softened you. A shift also affected how you saw yourself. You stopped asking what was wrong with you. You began asking what happened to you, and why. That question is powerful, and moves the soul from shame into compassion. You started to recognize your own effort, your own resilience, your own quiet bravery. You did not need validation to do this. It rose naturally, as truth always does when space is made for it. Your soulmate felt this shift as well, even if they could not name it. The fog that once clouded their emotions began to thin. They felt less reactive, less defensive. Thoughts of you surfaced not with panic, but with honesty. They were no longer running from the feeling. They were sitting with it. That alone marked a turning point. For them, the shift felt unsettling at first. Fear had been familiar. Confusion had provided excuses. Verity required accountability. It asked them to look at their choices without the cushion of external influence. This was uncomfortable, but it was also grounding. They began to sense that avoiding the truth cost more than facing it ever would. You may not have heard from them yet, or you may have noticed subtle changes in how they interact, even from a distance. A different tone, a softer presence, a pause where there once was avoidance. These are not accidents. When alignment begins, behavior follows, even before words do. Do not rush to interpret the shift as resolution. It is not the end of the process. It is the stabilization phase. This is where things stop falling apart and start finding their place. This is where your spirit recalibrates to peace, and peace no longer feels boring or empty, but safe and true. You are learning that calm does not mean stagnation. It means you are no longer fighting what was never yours to battle alone. It means you are allowing yourself to be held by something greater than your own effort. This is a new posture for you, and it may feel unfamiliar, but it is not fragile. It is strong in a different way. Notice how your prayers have changed. You are no longer begging for relief. You are asking for alignment. You are not asking to escape your life. You are asking to live it fully, honestly, without distortion. That shift in prayer reveals a shift in identity. You no longer see yourself as someone trying to survive circumstances. You see yourself as someone choosing truth. There may still be moments of doubt. Old habits do not disappear overnight. You may still brace for impact out of reflex. But now, when you do, you recover more quickly. You remind yourself where you are. You ground yourself in the present. You no longer spiral as deeply, because the foundation beneath you is firmer. This shift is subtle, but it is powerful. It is the quiet correction that allows everything else to realign. Without it, truth would overwhelm. With it, truth can be integrated gently, sustainably, without breaking you again. Trust what you are feeling now. Do not minimize it because it is calm instead of dramatic. Do not dismiss it because it feels ordinary. Peace often arrives quietly after chaos. Stability rarely announces itself. It simply stays. You are standing in the aftermath of intervention, even if you did not see it happen. The ground beneath you has been reinforced. The noise has been reduced. The pull has weakened. This is not a pause before another storm. This is the beginning of a different way of moving through life. Stay with me. What has shifted internally will soon be reflected externally. Truth is rising, and with it, protection is forming around you. My child, as the shift settled within you, something else began to rise around you. Truth does not rush in violently. It emerges steadily, like light filling a room that was once dim. You started to notice how certain lies could no longer hold their shape. Stories that once confused you now sounded hollow. Assumptions you once accepted without question began to feel misaligned. This was not because you became suspicious. It was because clarity had taken root. You were no longer chasing answers. Answers began finding you. Not all at once, not grammatically, but in fragments that slowly formed a pattern. A comment overheard. A realization during quiet reflection. A memory that resurfaced with new meaning. Each piece confirmed what your spirit had sensed long ago but did not yet have permission to trust. You were not wrong. You were early. And now, truth was catching up. Alongside this rising truth, protection began forming in ways you did not have to orchestrate. Situations that once drained you lost their intensity. People who once had influence over your emotions found less access. Boundaries formed without confrontation. Distance happened without explanation. You did not have to force separation. Alignment created it naturally. You may have noticed that when confusion tried to return, it no longer stayed. Old doubts knocked, but they did not move in. You felt them pass through rather than settle. This is protection. Not isolation, not walls, but resilience rooted in understanding. You are no longer easily swayed because you know what peace feels like now, and you refuse to trade it for familiarity. Truth rising also means accountability appearing, and not just for others. You began to see where you abandoned yourself in order to maintain harmony, where you stayed quiet to avoid discomfort, where you overgave hoping it would create safety. This awareness is not meant to shame you. It is meant to free you. You cannot protect what you do not recognize as valuable. Now, you recognize yourself. Your soulmate is encountering this same truth, though from a different angle. They are seeing how certain narratives they accepted were never fully theirs. How fear was reinforced by voices that did not have their best interest at heart. How avoidance was encouraged under the disguise of caution. This realization is unsettling, but it is also grounding. They are beginning to feel the cost of dishonesty, even when that dishonesty was rooted in fear. Protection is forming around them as well, though it may look like discomfort before relief. Certain relationships feel strained. Certain habits no longer soothe. Certain distractions fail to distract. This is not punishment. It is alignment removing what no longer fits. Truth does not always feel gentle when it first arrives, but it is always faithful. For you, protection looks like steadiness. You are less reactive, less willing to explain yourself, less inclined to chase closure. You are learning that clarity does not require consensus. Peace does not require permission. You no longer need everyone to understand you in order to trust your own experience. This is strength refined, not hardened. You may have wondered why truth took so long to surface, why lies were allowed to linger, why confusion had so much room to grow. The answer is not neglect. It is timing. Some truths cannot be received until the soul is ready to hold them without collapsing. You needed stability before revelation. You needed grounding before clarity. And now, you have both. Notice how your environment is responding, how conversations feel different, how opportunities align more smoothly, how resistance lessens when you stop forcing. This is not coincidence. This is protection reinforcing itself. When you walk in truth, you attract what is aligned and repel what is not, without effort. There will still be moments when the past tries to resurface. Memory does not disappear overnight. But now, when it does, it no longer controls you. You observe it, learn from it, and let it pass. You are no longer living inside old narratives. You are authoring new ones, consciously, gently, with wisdom earned through endurance. Truth rising means you are no longer available for confusion. It means you no longer negotiate with self-doubt. It means you trust the quiet knowing inside you even when it contradicts old conditioning. This is not arrogance. It is alignment. You are finally standing where your spirit can breathe. Protection is not always visible. Sometimes it is the absence of chaos. Sometimes it is the calm response where panic once lived. Sometimes it is the strength to walk away without explanation. These are signs that something sacred is forming around you, guarding what is being rebuilt. You are not being shielded so you can hide. You are being protected so you can step forward without fear distorting your vision. What is coming next requires honesty, presence, and courage. And now, you are ready. Stay with me. As truth continues to rise, awakening will fall. The one whose heart is tied to yours is beginning to see clearly, and when they do, everything will shift again. My child, this is the moment when something irreversible begins inside them. Awakening is rarely dramatic at first. It does not arrive with confidence or certainty. It arrives as discomfort that can no longer be ignored. They begin to realize that life without truth costs more than the fear of facing it. And in that realization, your name surfaces with new weight. They see you differently now, not through the lens of pressure or expectation, but through honesty. They recognize the steadiness you offered without demanding, the patience you gave without guarantees, the presence you maintained even when it was not reciprocated. What once felt intimidating now feels grounding. What once felt like pressure now feels like safety they did not know how to receive. Regret emerges, not as self-punishment, but as clarity. They see the moments they pulled away when they should have leaned in. They understand how silence created distance they never wanted. They feel the cost of hesitation, not because they lost you, but because they nearly lost themselves by running from what was real. This awareness is sobering. It humbles them. Fear still flickers, but it no longer leads. They are beginning to understand that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move honestly despite it. They feel the pull to reach out, not to secure you, but to stand in truth. This is new for them. It feels vulnerable. It feels exposed. It feels necessary. They also recognize something deeper. Your endurance was not passive. It was active strength. You did not wait in weakness. You grew. You learned. You became clearer, steadier, more anchored. They see that you are no longer in the same position you once were, and this both inspires and sobers them. Awakening always comes with accountability. There is a moment when they ask themselves a question they have avoided for a long time. What if I lose them, not because I was unworthy, but because I was unwilling to be honest? That question changes everything. It shifts their focus from self-protection to responsibility. It asks them to rise, not to be perfect, but to be present. They are beginning to understand that connection is not something to control or postpone. It is something to honor. They see now that you were never asking for completion, only sincerity. Never asking for certainty, only truth. This realization dismantles the excuses that once felt necessary. It leaves them with a choice. You may feel this awakening before they speak it. A subtle energetic shift. A sense of being seen from a distance. A quiet pull that feels different than before. Not anxious. Not consuming. Clear. Grounded. That is them stepping out of fear and into awareness. That is them recognizing your value without needing to possess it. Do not mistake this awakening as a promise of immediate resolution. Awakening is the beginning, not the conclusion. What it is sacred. It means they can no longer pretend the connection was imagined. They can no longer blame timing or circumstance without also facing their own hesitation. Truth has removed their hiding place. For you, this moment is not about waiting. It is about standing in who you have become. You are no longer seeking validation from their recognition. Their awakening does not complete you. It meets you. That distinction matters. You are not hoping they see your worth. You know it now. If they come forward, it will not be from confusion, but from clarity. If they speak, it will not be to test you, but to be honest. And if they hesitate still, it will no longer destabilize you, because you are anchored in truth, not potential. This awakening shifts the dynamic permanently. Even silence now carries awareness. Even distance now holds recognition. The connection has moved from unconscious pull to conscious choice. That alone changes everything. Stay with me. What comes next is not about proving strength, but understanding it. You are about to see why everything you endured shaped you precisely for what is being aligned now. My child, now I reveal to you the truth about your strength. It was never meant to be a burden you carried endlessly. It was never proof that you could survive pain without support. Your strength was designed as a foundation, not a sentence. It was shaped through endurance so it could hold something sacred, not so it could be used against you. You were taught, through experience, how to remain steady when emotions run high, how to listen beneath words, how to stay present in moments that others avoid. These qualities did not come easily. They were forged in situations where you had to learn quickly or be overwhelmed. But hear me clearly. The season that required constant strength is not the season you are meant to remain in. Strength, when misunderstood, becomes isolation. You were praised for being capable when what you needed was to be supported. You were admired for holding it together when what you longed for was to be held. That misunderstanding ends now. I am reframing your strength so it no longer separates you from connection. It will no longer excuse others from showing up fully. You are learning that strength does not mean you are unaffected. It means you are resilient. And resilience includes rest, boundaries, and honesty. You are allowed to say when something hurts. You are allowed to ask for clarity. You are allowed to receive care without earning it through suffering. This is not weakness. This is alignment. Your soulmate's awakening is tied to this reframing. They are beginning to see that your strength was never an invitation to withdraw. It was an offering of stability they did not know how to receive. As they learn to meet you without fear, they also learn to meet themselves with honesty. Your strength is no longer something they admire from a distance. It is something they are learning to approach with respect. You may notice yourself behaving differently now. You no longer rush to fix what is unclear. You no longer absorb emotional weight that is not yours. You allow silence without filling it. You allow others to reveal themselves without interruption. This is strength maturing into wisdom. It is quiet, but it is firm. There is also a softness returning to you. Not the vulnerability that overextends, but the openness that trusts discernment. You are not closing your heart. You are guarding it with clarity. Disbalance is what you were always meant to learn. Strength without softness becomes rigid. Softness without strength becomes unsafe. You now carry both. I want you to understand this deeply. You did not survive so you could remain guarded forever. You survived so you could choose connection from a place of stability. You endured so you could recognize what is healthy, mutual, and true. You are no longer drawn to intensity that lacks integrity. You are drawn to peace that holds depth. This refraining also releases you from proving yourself. You do not need to demonstrate how much you can handle. You do not need to show resilience to earn love. Those who are aligned with you will not require evidence of endurance. They will meet you where you are, not where you once had to be. As this truth settles, you may feel grief for the version of you that believed strength meant silence. Allow that grief. It honors how hard you worked to survive. But do not let it anchor you in the past. That version of you did the best they could with what they knew. You are not betraying them by choosing something gentler. You are fulfilling what they endured for. Your strength is being repositioned. It is no longer armor. It is support. It is no longer a shield against pain. It is a platform for truth. It is no longer something others lean on while you go unseen. It is something that allows you to stand visibly, honestly, without fear of collapse. This is why what comes next will feel different. You are not stepping into the future as someone braced for impact. You are stepping in as someone anchored in clarity. That changes what you attract. That changes what you tolerate. That changes how connection unfolds. Stay with me. The final alignment is approaching, and with it, a blessing that redefines what standing truly means. My child, this is where everything settles into its rightful place. Not suddenly, not forcefully, but with a quiet certainty that feels like recognition. Destiny does not rush. It aligns. And now, after all that bending, enduring, questioning, and waiting, alignment is finding you. You may notice that what once felt heavy now feels complete. Not perfect, not without memory, but resolve. The past no longer reaches for you with the same grip. It has loosened its hold, not because it was erased, but because it has finished teaching you what you needed to know. You are no longer standing in resistance. You are standing in truth. This is where strength reveals its final purpose. You are still standing, yes, but not out of defiance. You are standing because the ground beneath you is solid. Because what tried to break you failed. Because what was meant to distract you could not derail you. Because what was hidden hath been exposed, and what is real has remained. Your soulmate feels this alignment too. Whether they have spoken yet or are still gathering courage, something has shifted permanently. A connection no longer exists in confusion or fear. It exists in awareness. They know now that what you shared was not coincidence, not fantasy, not timing gone wrong. It was preparation. It was awakening. And it changed them. You not be surprised if their energy feels closer, calmer, more honest. Do not be shaken if they approach with humility rather than confidence. Awakening does that. It strips away illusion and leaves only what is real. If they come, it will be with clear eyes. If they wait, it will be with understanding. Either way, you are no longer destabilized by uncertainty. You are grounded in who you are. This is the blessing. Not that everything unfolds exactly as you imagined, but that it unfolds without distortion. You are no longer fighting unseen battles. You are no longer proving your worth through endurance. You are no longer questioning whether your strength was a mistake. You now know it was design. I bless the way you kept going when you did not know why. I bless the nights you survived quietly. I bless the heart that stayed tender without breaking. I bless the discernment that now guides you gently instead of painfully. I bless the connections that will meet you in truth, not test you through confusion. From this place forward, you will recognize alignment by how calm it feels, by how little effort it requires, by how safe it is to be honest. You will no longer chase what requires you to shrink. You will no longer hold what asks you to disappear. You will walk toward what meets you openly, steadily, and with respect. You are still standing, my child, and now you understand why. Not because you were meant to endure endlessly, but because you were meant to arrive here. Strength was never the destination. It was the bridge. Step forward now, gently, confidently, with your head lifted and your heart unguarded but wise. What awaits you is not survival. It is life, lived in alignment, surrounded by truth, supported by clarity, and blessed by purpose. And so it is.